Hello and welcome to The Window, talkSPORT's daily YouTube show, keeping you up to date with everything going on in the transfer window. Now today I'm joined again by Furniss from Opta, who's got all the data and stats behind the biggest transfer stories of the day. Hi Matt.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, and you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Excellent. Well, there's only one place to start, Alejandro Isak. We all know he's a great player. We've all watched him score goals for Newcastle, but you've done the statistical analysis and research into why Liverpool are potentially prepared to break the British transfer record again for him this window.
Yeah, I mean, Isak, one of the best strikers in the Premier League at the moment. Still only 25 years old as well, so he's got his best years ahead of him. Obviously, Newcastle signed him from Real Sociedad in August 2022. At Sociedad, he showed signs of being a top striker, scored 17 goals in 2020-21. Didn't follow up with a great scoring season, but actually it's 7 successive seasons now that he's scored double figures. And the 2 at Newcastle, he's reached 20 or more goals. Last season, his 23 top-flight goals were more than they were in his first full season at the club, 21. And only Andy Cole, Les Ferdinand and Alan Shearer have scored more in a single Premier League season for the Magpies. Across all competitions, 27 goals in 42 appearances for Newcastle. And with a minutes per goal ratio of 123 minutes per goal, he averaged goals more frequently than players like Mohamed Salah and Rafinha across the top 5 European leagues. So definitely a talented player that Liverpool undoubtedly want to get their hands on, but will they get him? It's one of those ones where Newcastle obviously want to keep him. There's that talk about Hugo Ekitike, as we discussed on Tuesday. Which of those two clubs will get him? And yeah, it's one of those ones where Newcastle obviously don't want to let Isak go, and they want both of them. But for Liverpool, obviously Isak's their number one target, but if they can't get him, Ekitike will be a great player instead.
Yeah, there was talk of both clubs potentially wanting both players. I mean, it might end up that, you know, one gets one gets the other. That probably seems the most likely. Are they similar players? How do they differ?
I mean, both of them have that kind of long, tall, wiry frame. Both exceptional, hard-working players in the final third as well. Last season, Ekitike ranks within the top 10 for pressures in the final third, high-intensity pressures in the final third, and the same in the opposition half. Now, that's similar to Isak in the Premier League last season. He worked incredibly hard for the ball, and only Dominic Solanke and Erling Haaland applied more high-intensity pressures in the final third than he did. He had 604 in the Premier League. So you're one of those players that will not just be an outstanding goal scorer for you, but they work incredibly hard off the ball as well. And he brings teammates into play as well. Only Anthony Gordon and Bruno Guimaraes last season created more chances than Isak did for his teammates in the Premier League. And that's a similar story for Ekitike, really. Ekitike created many chances for his Eintracht Frankfurt teammates, but also his attacking output. He had more touches in the opposition box than any other player. And his high shot volume as well is a really important thing, because you want players to be attempting a lot of shots because you'll score more goals that way. And both players are really great at that. So we talk back Isak now, and his non-penalty XG per 90 last season was 0.57. So you're looking at his shot expectation of scoring 1 every 2 games. He obviously exceeded that last season because he's a phenomenal finisher. But that enables him to convert a fifth of his non-penalty shots, 20%. And only 6 players managed to do that, Isak being one of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk last season. Is he better than Haaland, or is Haaland still better than him? But they're different sorts of strikers, aren't they, obviously, as we know, to watch them. What are some of the biggest differences? What do the stats say are the biggest differences between Isak and Haaland?
Isak's a lot more involved in the build-up play. City obviously use Haaland as an out-and-out front man. And as I said there, off the ball work, Haaland and Isak are very similar. Work really hard for the ball, press high up the pitch. And that has been kind of like maybe an unfair criticism for a lot of people on Haaland. We know he doesn't get involved a lot, but that's down to the team style of play. But it's not like he's not doing stuff off the ball. Now, Isak does that and is heavily involved in a lot of what Newcastle do in the attacking third. So they're very different players. Isak's probably not as clinical as Haaland at this stage of his career. But who's to say that if you join Liverpool, we're not going to get a 30, 35 goal a season out of Isak. I think that he's a player that is continuing to get better and better. As I said before, he's only 25. That ceiling is so high with Isak. And it, as a neutral for me, that's seeing someone like that in that Liverpool side where he's going to get a phenomenal amount of chances, is quite an exciting prospect. But equally, I'd quite like to see him with Ekitike at Newcastle side and see how far they can go.
Yeah, that's a frightening prospect, isn't it? Let's talk about another player who scored a lot of Premier League goals last year, Johan Whissa. 19 goals in the Premier League for Brentford. Spurs are interested in him, aren't they? What sort of player would he be for them? I mean, Spurs fans are excited by the prospect of him next to Kudus. So what could he bring Spurs or Nottingham Forest, because they're interested too?
Yeah, I mean, this is a player that maybe surprised quite a few people last season. Probably not Brentford fans because they've seen enough of him. But 19 non-penalty goals last season in the Premier League. I mean, he had 19 goals in general, none of them from the spot. Only Mohamed Salah scored more from non-penalty shots last season with 20 in the Premier League. Again, like Isak, really good shooting positions as well. Averaged the same XG per 90 as Isak did last season, 0.57. Only Erling Haaland exceeded that among the 45 players to score six or more non-penalty goals in the Premier League. Now, he's all-time top scorer in the Premier League for Brentford. 3 more goals than Brian Mbeumo. He's got 45 in the Premier League. Obviously, 9 more than Ivan Toney as well. So Brentford would be losing a brilliant player for them over the years. Brilliant goal scorer as well. But the most intriguing thing about Wissa is that partnership he's had with Mbeumo at Brentford. Over time, I think last season they both scored in the same game on 8 occasions, but also were up there for the best partnerships in terms of chances created for one another. So they created 29 chances for each other last season in the Premier League. Only Dominic Szoboszlai and Mohamed Salah and Cole Palmer and Noni Madueke created more for each other. And they also assisted 6 goals for each other, which was the second highest in the Premier League. So Tottenham and Forest probably should be saying, actually, why don't we try and get both of them in? Because that partnership, it's like Batman and Robin. They're the perfect partnership.
Yeah, well, United still haven't gotten Mbeumo over the line. Apparently, Brentford are still asking for a little bit more money for that one. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. So, with Johan Whissa, what's his XG saying? Is he overperforming it? Is he underperforming it? Is he an excellent finisher? Is he creating loads of chances for himself or others?
I mean, there's nothing to suggest that he's an exceptional finisher. He exceeded XG last season, but as I said many times before, and I think is quite wise to mention, is that exceeding your XG doesn't really make you a great finisher unless you do that over a long period of time. And that is the opposite way. If you miss a lot of chances in 1-2 seasons compared to your XG, it doesn't mean you're a bad finisher. Getting in those positions is the most important thing, and you can be coached over time, especially if you're a younger player. So I think with Wissa, it would be interesting because he'd be joining a team where, well, potentially at Spurs, he won't be the main man. And him and Mbeumo are quite clearly the main men at Brentford. They are, everything goes to them in attacking third alongside Mikkel Damsgaard. So if he was to join Spurs, would he get sufficient game time to really impress? He'd be maybe a bit of a squad player there. At Forest, especially with the departure of Anthony Elanga and the expected departure of Morgan Gibbs-White, who could actually affect that move to Spurs. Very much like the Isak Ekitike here, it's kind of the clubs playing off each other. If he was to join Forest, I think he would become obviously a massive player for them, a key player for them, and you would probably expect them to expect him to be probably around the same sort of player as he is at Brentford, because they play in a low block, they like to transition. Attacking transitions are really important for them as well. So that is probably a more similar style for him than Spurs. And we don't know what Spurs will be like under Thomas Frank. Obviously, at Brentford, he knows Wissa really well. I'm not too sure if many of the links are being created because they know each other so well. It doesn't feel like Spurs would probably be looking at Wissa when they sign Kudus and want Gibbs-White as well. But Spurs under Frank, obviously under Brentford, they played a low block very often, but Frank has proved in the past that they do play possession football and are quite attacking at Brentford in the Championship and Brøndby in Denmark as well. So it would be interesting to see how he would transition into that Spurs side if he was to join. But if I was a betting man, I would say Forest is probably the more likely destination if he was to leave Brentford.
Okay, interesting. All right, we've spoken about a couple of players who might be leaving Brentford, so it's only fair that we talk about someone who they're interested in, and that's Ipswich winger Amari Hutchinson. They've had a £35 million offer rejected by Ipswich. Apparently they reached his relegation release clause, but as the offer wasn't cash up front, it was rejected, but they retain an interest in him. What are the stats saying about Amari Hutchinson?
It's quite hard to read too much into Hutchinson's performance last season. Obviously, Ipswich didn't perform that well, got relegated from the Premier League. He was one of their more outstanding players. They've already lost one of those in Liam Delap to Chelsea. Hutchinson is a player that they would love to keep this season to help get them back into the Premier League from the Championship, but it looks quite unlikely at this moment, as he's probably the most valuable player they've got in the squad, and many clubs, as you said, are after him. Now, last season, he was within the top 10 Premier League players who were aged under 21 or younger last season for chances created overall, as well as a chance to create an open play and expected assists. So of those young crop of players, he was one of the most creative last season in the Premier League, despite being a struggling side. Now, in his first kind of breakthrough season at Ipswich in the Championship, he was one of their most important players in getting them up to the Premier League. He was involved in 15 league goals that season, 10 goals, 5 assists. That was the second most by an under-21 player in the Championship that season. Only Abdul Fatou at Leicester had more. So he's one of those players that is quite clearly a great prospect, and he showed that further this summer in the European Under-21s Championship for England, where they went on to go and win, and he was one of their key players in that tournament. So in that tournament, he was the only player to create more than 10 chances and complete 10 dribbles. Looking back over time in European Under-21 Championship history, quite a select few players have done that, and some great names there as well. You've got Pedro Neto, Rodri, Dani Ceballos, you've got Thiago Alcantara, Isco, Shaqiri as well. So he's among some great players who've gone on to do great things to do that. So I think he could be quite an exciting player for someone like Brentford. Maybe it's not someone who's going to come and hit the floor running and being sensational straight away. I do have fears for Brentford, especially if they sell those two players that we've talked about before in Wissa and Mbeumo. But Hutchinson is someone who has shown potential and probably is worth quite a high transfer value. So I can see where Ipswich are holding out there.
Yeah, and what do you see as his best position? Because Ipswich have used him out wide and also centrally in that sort of number 10 role. Where does he perform best, Amari Hutchinson?
Well, he played mostly on the right last season, but as you say, yeah, did play in that number 10 role. With Damsgaard in that 10 role for Brentford, I can't see him dislodging him. And I think Hutchinson, with his dribbling strength as well and strength from ball carries, is probably best on the right. And that will be the case if they lose Mbeumo as well. So I think that, yeah, if he did join Brentford, he'd be playing on the right.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about another winger then, Alejandro Garnacho, because it seems like there's been so much talk about him this window. We know he's not in Ruben Amorim's plans. He hasn't turned up for pre-season training. So it's Aston Villa who are the most recent club to be linked with him. What are the stats saying behind Garnacho? What could he bring to a club like Villa?
So Garnacho is one of those players that I think a lot of people think is maybe older than he is, because he's been around quite a while at Man United. The last 2 seasons he's played quite regularly, despite sort of suggested a fallout with Ruben Amorim, as you say there. But he's actually played the 4th most minutes of any under-21 player across the top 5 European leagues over the last 2 seasons. That's the exact number of appearances as well, 72 as Lamine Yamal over that period. Only potential Arsenal signing Christian Mosquera has started more games or played more games among those under-21s. And in that same period, Garnacho actually ranks 4th for goals across the same number of players, so those under-21 players with 13, 6th for most in goal involvements with 19, 4th for most chances created with 83, and 3rd for most chances created from open play with 80. So among those players aged under 21 across the top European leagues, you feel like Garnacho's stock is actually quite high, despite not really playing loads of minutes last season. So he is one player that if he was to go for another club, again, that ceiling is quite high there, and he could perform, if given the opportunities to play, really well, and is quite an exciting player for anyone. I know that Chelsea now, there's the kind of links there in January to his signing, and now that supposedly back in, there's been talk about some swap deals with someone like Nicholas Jackson there. But this is a player that's really exciting to watch. There are still kind of question marks around some temperament maybe there. Obviously, I've talked about that fallout already, but other teammates and ex-teammates have kind of suggested that maybe there's an attitude issue there. I can't comment on that. I'm here for the stats. So, not one for me. But someone like Paul Scholes last year, I think he referred to Garnacho as technically scruffy, which is kind of right when you look at his dribbling stats. Last season, or actually over the last 2 seasons, 81 players have attempted 100 or more dribbles in the Premier League. He ranks 72nd out of those players for dribble success. He's only completed 38.1% over that time. But he's great in those situations where he's got space to run into and attack players. And yes, his dribble success rate isn't great, but he does create carnage when he's running with the ball. Only Cole Palmer over the last 2 seasons in the Premier League has created more chances or had more shots from ball carries than Garnacho. So despite that lack of playing time, Garnacho is quite clearly one of the best ball carriers in the Premier League.
Okay, so just to unpick that a little bit. So he's carrying the ball and creating chances when he does, but his dribbles are unsuccessful. So what does that mean? How does those two tie into each other?
So dribbling, I think a dribble defined by Opta is when you're kind of in a 50-50 battle and you get past your opponent in a duel. So what Garnacho maybe isn't strong at is in those tight situations where you've kind of got to escape in the corner or get round a player when they're quite close to you. A ball carry suggests that he's quite good at running into space. So when United counterattack, for example, if there's space to run into, he's great at actually doing something at the end of those. So creating a chance of having a shot. So I would suggest that, in tight scenarios, not so great, but when there's space to run into or like in the final third, etc., he's good in those situations. So that would suit a team that maybe look to attack in transition. And this isn't going to happen, but someone like Forest, like he would actually excel there if you were to put him in that Forest side in the way that Nuno plays. He could be great there. And actually there's a high resale value if you can get him at quite a good price.
Yeah, well, he does reportedly want to stay in the Premier League. There are a few clubs interested, so we might find that he's one of these players who leaves Old Trafford and then thrives, and he wouldn't be the first. Elanga is another example of that, isn't he? So you mentioned Nicholas Jackson there. There's been talk of a swap deal. He's now, well, it seems he'd be third choice striker at Chelsea after they brought in João Pedro and Liam Delap. Apparently he's interested in a move away, knowing he's not going to be top of the list there. And Man United are interested in him, aren't they? He had a great start to the season last year when Chelsea did as well, then tailed off towards the second half, didn't he? And even though Chelsea had a good finish to the season, he wasn't integral to that. What are the stats saying about Jackson? Because it seems like sometimes he scores some great goals and other times, he'll miss the easy ones, won't he?
He was a confusing player to analyse. He's one of those players that kind of you watch Chelsea when he plays and they look better than when he's not there, I think. But how much of that is down to the other options that they've got in that position? Now they've got João Pedro and now they've got Liam Delap. As you say, he's third choice and his presence in that side isn't so important. He's got a really good goal scoring record and he's still quite young. So his goal record at Chelsea is decent enough, 24 non-penalty goals. That is betted by just 11 players in the competition since he joined the club. So that's 2 seasons worth of data there. But in truth, he has been wasteful in front of goal. He's underperformed his XG by 7 goals over that period. Now, what's actually quite comical here, if you aren't a Man United fan, is that the only player to have done worse than him in that period is Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and United are linked to both of those players. So I don't really know what their scouting department are looking for there. And when you consider that Man United I would say they haven't really improved any player over the last few years that's joined them. Bruno Fernandes potentially is the only one you could say has improved since joining Man United. There's not really much hope there for someone like Jackson. But the thing is, he is relatively young and inexperienced. He's only really had 3 full seasons of top-flight football. And his first season at Villarreal, he played 9 games in La Liga. And then his second season, he only played around 24, I think it was. So it's not even like he had a full season in Spain. He's still 24 years old, so there is still scope to improve there. Since his breakthrough season at Villarreal in 2022-23, he has scored 36 non-penalty goals in the top 5 European leagues. Now, of the 22 players to have scored 35 or more, he is the youngest. So there's potential there. If you can find a coach who can bring the best out in him, then maybe Jackson could turn into a striker that could score plenty of goals for you. Now, is Ruben Amorim that coach? I don't know. Are Man United that club? Again, don't know. It's evidence suggests maybe they're not. But there's also that potential issue there with discipline. I think 2 red cards over the last 2 months, one against Newcastle away for an elbow, that awful tackle against Flamengo in the Club World Cup, 18 yellow cards over 2 seasons at Chelsea as well in all competitions. And of his 17 that have come in the Premier League, 9 have been for dissent or arguing with officials. And that suggests a kind of a lack of maturity there. And just being quite an annoying player. So he's something that he needs to maybe grow up a little bit there and grow into a bit more of a mature player, because suspensions will affect that, and it has affected his time at Chelsea as well. So I think United potentially, if they were to sign Jackson, there is a player there, there is a striker there that could be quite good. But is it the right club? Don't know. Is it the right coach for him? Again, don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure Man United fans would be overly excited about the prospect of him being their main number 9 this season. But we'll see what happens with Nicholas Jackson and all the others we've talked about. Thanks a lot, Matt.
No worries. Nice to speak to you.
So those were the stats and figures behind some of the biggest transfer stories of the day on The Window. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next time.